What is a Formula One race weekend? Heyo, thanks for tuning into the Delta. My name is Chris. I remember when I first tuned into a Formula One race weekend, I was relatively confused. It wasn't necessarily hard to learn, but it did require some base knowledge to research and understand what the heck I was watching and what I was hearing from the commentators or the interviewers and what race car drivers were saying in these interviews and so on and so forth. With that being said, I'm going to put together like a beginner's guide so you can go into a race weekend knowing what's going on. If you're new to the sport, you can turn on a race weekend, whether it be a Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, and you can see what's in front of you and hear what's being told to you and kind of understand what's going on. And then you can figure out what more you would like to learn or figure out on your own time. One of the things that I did find very interesting, though, was when I was doing this research, I was like, oh man, I should know all this stuff. And it turns out I didn't know every single thing, and I learned a few things that I thought I should know. So even if you are an F1 veteran, you may find this video useful as a refresher prior to the season coming up. Something that can remind you, like, oh yeah, that is what these tires are used for. Oh, I didn't realize that, we're going to China this upcoming season, so on and so forth. Hopefully it's helpful for you, especially if you're new, because it was really confusing the first couple weeks trying to figure things out. And I don't necessarily think the racing is fun if you're trying to figure out what is going on. Also, before we get started, I would like to ask you to hit the thumbs up and subscribe, please. Your support is what drives, see what I did there, me to do better and work harder as I learn how to create scripts, shoot and edit videos, and overall make an enjoyable viewing experience for you. The goal is to be your source for F1 news, reactions, information, and opinions through the lens of an American F1 fan. So now that that's out of the way, let's get started. So the goal of today's video is to talk about what a Formula One weekend is like and what the calendar is for this upcoming 2024 season. We'll first start with a typical race weekend, and it's pretty simple. There's a date, a location, and a race. But when we say schedule or calendar, it encompasses more than just, hey, you show up here and you race this day. There's multiple formats that can occur. The most common or typical one is you have 3 practices called free practices, 1 qualification round, and then the race. Or another option can be, 1 practice, a qualification round, another practice, a sprint race, and then the actual race. We'll get into that later. So let's start with what is a practice. A practice session called a free practice is where drivers can take the time that is allotted to learn the circuit that they're racing that weekend and get comfortable with the specification the team has made to their vehicles. It also means that teams are testing their car, so in between practices, they can tweak and make necessary changes to the car for optimal performance. Like examples for tweaking the car or tuning the car would be like testing the new parts, adjusting suspension and the front and rear wings, things like that. That they have a base car, but for this particular location and this particular track, it has this many turns that we need to make sure our car is able to handle at its optimal performance. A typical practice format is a free practice, nicknamed, or not nicknamed, but shortened to FP, free practice 1 and free practice 2. And those will typically be held on a Friday. And then you have FP3, which is the first event on Saturday, prior to the qualification rounds. And then that leads us to what is the qualification rounds, also known as a quali. Qualifying is usually done on Saturday after the FP3 and is designed to determine the grid order for the actual race. Drivers will race around the track as quick as possible, and their fastest lap will be recorded. Simply put, if you are the slowest car out of the 20, you will be in last place, and if you're the fastest car out of the 20, you will be in first place. It's pretty simple. Qualifying is broken down into 3 sessions in itself, Q1, Q2, and Q3, which last 18, 15, and 12 minutes respectively. The 5 slowest drivers in Q1 will be eliminated from Q2, and the next 5 slowest will be eliminated from Q3. And Q3 will be the remaining 10 drivers racing for the fastest lap times. So basically, you have your 1 through 20. Let's say the fastest lap in Q1 is 1:30, and your slowest lap is 1:32. Now, somewhere in between there was 5 slow cars. The 5 slowest cars, they're kicked out of Q1. And then in Q2, you'll have the next, out of the 15, the next slowest 5 cars. They'll be kicked out of Q3. And then you'll have your third qualifying round, and those will be your grid positions 1 through 10. And then that will bring us into Sunday, the main day, the day that matters most. The reason we all love to watch F1, and that is because it is race day, the Grand Prix. Race day starts first when the drivers are conducting what is called a Renaissance lap. So teams and drivers can get a feel of the circuit conditions for the day and any last-minute checks on their cars. After the cars perform their reconnaissance lap, the cars will be parked in their respective grid position based off of their qualification times the previous day. After some pageantry, some interviews, and the national anthem, the track will be cleared and the drivers will conduct what is called a formation lap behind a safety car. The cars will remain in grid order behind the safety car, and you will most likely see them swerving back and forth to get their tires up to an optimal temperature as best they can prior to the start of the race. Once they make their formation lap, they will park back into their respective grid positions and wait for the start of the race, which will be very, very shortly after the last car parks in the 20th grid position. Once all the cars are in position, they'll begin revving their engines in preparation of the start. Above them will be 5 lights. They will turn on one at a time, red, one after another, until all 5 are turned on. Once all 5 are turned on, they will suddenly go out. Once the lights are out, that is the start of the race. Once all the lights are out, it's a mad dash for positioning. The race has just begun. Everyone is typically full throttle, trying to make their moves, and personally, it is the most exciting part of a race for me. It's that first 30 seconds to a minute where, 12th position's trying to get into 9th position, and 5th position's trying to get into 3rd, and obviously 1 and 2 are battling for the pole position or the first place position, because after your first few laps, it's not that they're not jockeying for position or racing. It's just at that point in time, they have to think about the long game. So that is a typical race weekend in a nutshell. Practice, quali, race. Finishing in the top 10 is the goal for every driver and every team, because those are the positions that award points that accumulate throughout the season calendar. Obviously, the more points you get, the higher in the ranks you are. And at the end of the season, the driver with the most points is awarded the Drivers' Championship, and the team with the most accumulated points is awarded the Constructors' Championship. Here will be, as you can see, you'll have first place winning 25 points, second place 18, third 15, fourth 12, fifth 10 points, sixth 8 points, seventh 6 points, eighth 4 points, ninth 2 points, and 10th position earns just 1 point. But those points matter, especially at the end of a season. There is an exception to the format. So one of the exceptions that you need to know is that some races are in the afternoon local time, such as the Italian GP, and others are at night, like the Singapore GP, and some even more late at night, like last year's Las Vegas GP, which started at like 10 p.m. local time. And with that being said, like when they start at different times, that also means like practice times and dates can change as well based on the city or city ordinances. Because if it's a street track in Las Vegas, you can't have free practice during rush hour traffic when people are trying to get home. Another thing that will create a change in the weekend calendar is when the circuit hosts a sprint race. Well, now what is a sprint race? A sprint race is a 100-kilometer dash to the finish line. And the finishing order of the sprint is what determines the starting grid for Sunday's Grand Prix. There will most likely be no pit stops unless there's a prime opportunity to perform one, such as a red flag or a crash that would slow up the race long enough that someone can get a new set of tires or something like that. Day one of the weekend will be the free practice, followed by a qualifying round for the starting grid of the sprint. So drivers and team will get an opportunity to test their car on the track. Then they will perform a qualifying round. Whatever they qualify in that qualifying round will be the position that they go into the sprint race with. Then on the next day, they'll have another free practice, again, to test out their cars, make whatever adjustments they deem necessary. And then after the free practice, there will be the sprint race, which, again, is the 100-kilometer dash to the finish line. Then whatever they finish then in the sprint race is what will the grid order be for the actual race. So if you win the sprint race, you take pole position. If you lose the sprint race, you're in last position. Then Sunday, there will be the Grand Prix. The sprint race also holds a significance, though, outside of just grid position, because it also awards points for the drivers and teams for the drivers and constructor championships. The points are as followed. First place gets 8, and it just goes down the line, and 8th place gets 1. So pretty cut and dry. Not a ton of points, but if you are in a close race for that driver's championship or constructor's championship, coming in 6th place in the sprint race can make a huge deal. So that is basically what a weekend in F1 is. Now that we know what a race weekend is, we can now discuss the 2024 F1 calendar as a whole. The 2024 calendar will feature 24 races all around the world, starting off with the Bahrain GP, beginning on February 29th and ending on March 2nd. And then the following weekend, it will be racing in Jeddah in Saudi Arabia, March 9th, race weekend starting on the 7th of March. The significance of knowing these dates in advance is because the race weekends already break typical format rules, as the races will be on Saturday because of Ramadan, meaning the race weekend will technically start on Thursday. We're not going to go over every single race in this video, so here's a picture of the calendar, and feel free to pause the video and write down any date that you want to remember. If there's any particular race you want to expand upon, let me know in the comments, and I can see if I can make a whole video on that GP. Continuing on with what this season is going to offer, the season is going to will be in 21 countries across 5 continents. There is going to be your classic tracks like Silverstone, Spa, Suzuka, and the very classic and historical Monaco GP. Also, there will be some newer tracks on the calendar. Well, not new, but newer, that's what I should say, like Miami, Las Vegas, and Qatar. All these tracks have existed in the past. They've not solidified themselves as a staple in the Formula One world quite yet. One of the differences in this calendar year is China will be making its return. Starting April 19th through the 21st will be the first time the race has been done since 2019. For me personally, that's very interesting because I didn't get into Formula One until 2020. So to me, at least, it's a brand new track. And if you're also new to the Formula 21, then it's also a new track for you. I've heard that there have been some really fun races. If I don't hold me to it, don't fact check me, don't grill me in the comments. I do believe China holds one of the records for most overtakes in a single race. So we'll see how that goes. Overtakes doesn't necessarily mean a most exciting race, especially if all the overtakes are happening between, positions 10 through 15, and first place is winning by a minute and a half. But nonetheless, it seems that people are excited because it does have potential to be an exciting race. Another thing that is happening this year, that there will be 6 sprint weekends. You can see here in this graphic, the ones here, they'll be held in China, Miami, Austria, United States, Brazil, and Qatar. China and Miami will see their first sprint races ever, which is kind of weird because Miami, despite many opinions, Miami is my favorite GP, and I just think it's because I associate it with me living on the East Coast of America, and it's an American GP, and it's Miami, one of the most beautiful cities in the world. So I just kind of equate it to it being my home race. You know, It- like if you live in Italy, Monza might be it. If you're in Monaco, the Monaco GP is your favorite race. If you're from the UK, Silverstone is your GP. Luckily, with America, they have 3 GPs because the country is so big and the sport's trying to grow in those in America. So, if you're in California, you're probably excited about the Vegas GP. If you are a traditional F1 fan, you probably like COTA. They're in Austin, Texas. But for me, Miami is my favorite GP just because it's my race. It's my race that I get to enjoy in my time zone. So it being a sprint this year is going to be a little bit more interesting because I can't say I'm particularly fond of sprint weekends. I do think they add a nice little change of pace to the season, but when it comes down to, the big race on Sunday, I don't necessarily like having the sprint race as a preview to what the next day's event is going to be. My personal opinion. Some last little note here. There will be terms called double headers and triple headers, and that will just mean consecutive race weekends. Obviously, it's self-explanatory. A double header will be back-to-back race weekend, and a triple header will be 3 races in a row. This allows for the most races in a fair amount of time within the 52-week year, says Formula One. I'm sure some people hate it and others love it. Me personally, I'm on board with it. I love getting excited about the upcoming race weekends. And if that means I can get that feeling 3 times in a row, me being selfish in that way makes me excited. I'm sure it's a headache for the teams, though. I'm sure, drivers don't want to be traveling all over the world 3 consecutive weeks and teams trying to figure out how to fix their cars in such a short amount of time. Like if you have a bad race to start off a triple header, and now you have to not only figure out how to fix your car, but figure out how to get your car to the next location and see if it works again. And then following that weekend, if you didn't figure it out, have to try to figure it out in another short amount of time. I'm sure it's very stressful for the teams, but as a fan, I really enjoy back-to-back weekends. Another term that we can talk about is called a flyaway race. A flyaway race. Basically, that means races that are held in Europe allow teams to transport their cars and equipment via a truck. But when you need to get across oceans and long distances across the globe, they must use other transportation to get their cars and equipment to that venue. Thus, they have to fly away from Europe. And there we go. You now know what a Formula One race weekend is and what the 2024 calendar has in store. And you can watch knowing what you're looking at based on the day you're tuning in. So circle your favorite tracks on the calendar and set your plans for how and where you want to watch. For me personally, most races are in the morning. So for the special races I love, I like to make a nice breakfast with orange juice and coffee. If you've been watching Formula One for a while, do you have a tradition or a habit for race day? Let me know in the comments. Anyways, thanks for watching. My name is Chris, and you've tuned into the Delta. Hopefully this beginner's video will help you understand a bit more about Formula One so you won't be as confused as I was when I first turned on a race weekend. Please like and subscribe. Thank you so much. Take care, stay safe, and have fun out there. See ya. Bye.